Welcome to CancerVac's podcast, CEO Chats. Today I'm joined by my good friend, Mike Smith. Your bio says Michael, and your LinkedIn profile says Michael. I sometimes call you Mike, but I know you also go by Mikey sometimes too. So I want to make sure that we're getting your name right.
Everyone calls me Mikey.
All right, Mikey it is.
Stems from, I happened to work with someone in my first job that knew me from growing up, which was a great opportunity for me and got me into the industry. And ever since I've been Mikey. So I think of it as a one name introduction, like Prince. You know, everyone remembers me because of the name.
Yes, that's right. Hopefully it won't be the biotech executive formerly known as Mikey, right?
Yes, I hope not.
So I'm going to just give a quick rundown of your bio, Mikey, and fill in any gaps that if I miss something, and then we'll kind of get into a few things. But Mikey received his PharmD from the University of Utah, and then also a BS in neuroscience from BYU. He has nearly 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and you've held a lot of executive positions that have spanned, a lot of different sort of disciplines, early stage drug development, scientific affairs, regulatory affairs, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. Mike, you spent, let's see, I guess a little over 9 years at Czars Pharma, and then almost 5 years at PRA Health Systems, right? Health Sciences, rather.
Health Sciences, yes.
Yeah. And then now you serve as a Senior Vice President of Development at KalVista Pharmaceuticals. And if that weren't enough, you also maintain an appointment as an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Utah School of Pharmacy, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's unique. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting and kind of cool that you went to school at the University of Utah, and received your PharmD, and now you're back teaching there a little bit as well. That's got to be a little rewarding, I would imagine. Yeah,
I think there's various opportunities as an adjunct assistant to teach partial classes or to be a mentor or a preceptor to some of these young students, especially those interested in industry, and serve on an institutional review board, etc. So there's a wide gamut of opportunities for someone like myself.
I'm familiar with, I've worked with the University of Utah a lot in my past days with past biotech companies, and number one, just a phenomenal school. And even looking out of your back window, you can see just how beautiful the scenery is up around where you are. And so it's a beautiful place as well. But I've heard over the past, 5-10 years or so, there's been really a lot of changes up there, for the better, right? They've really put a lot of time and energy in recruiting, big, strong people, very credentialed people into the School of Pharmacy. It's been cool to watch.
Yeah, there's been a ton of growth, new building, actual capital expenditure, infrastructure. The teaching program has been modernized, I think, as well. Even since I've been there to meet the updated credentialing systems, and frankly, the staff and the professors there are really, I think, top notch. It's here in the Intermountain West, the University of Utah in particular, cancer is a major referral center, and there's a ton of research that goes on there, and it's a special institution for our geography.
Yeah, I know it really is, and I feel lucky to be here. And as you know, this CancerVacs, we have 2 sponsored research agreements with UCLA School of Medicine and then the Johnson Cancer Center, and we're working with a team of MDs and PhDs developing. We've got two drug programs that we're working on. The first is Ewing sarcoma, which is a soft tissue bone disease that affects children primarily. It's an orphan indication, 250,000 indication, or new incidences a year. Super high mortality rate, not a good drug on the market for it, right? And then our second program is a vaccine where we're trying to essentially help the immune system to recognize and identify cancerous tumors from a very early stage, so that the immune system can be informed on how to find them and get rid of them before, the invasive surgery, chemo, radiation, etc. So it's cool that you're right up there in the heart of that as well.
That's exciting. Immunotherapies, of course, have made tremendous leaps, and I think will continue to do
Right.
so. There is the antibody drug development phase, and now there's a lot of targeted immunotherapies, and I can only imagine it will become even more specific and impressive from an efficacy and safety perspective.
Yeah, that's I think so too. So tell me your story, Mike. Let's go back to the beginning.
Sure.
You grew up in Utah, is that right?
I did not actually.
Hey,
No.
tell me about it.
I grew up in Boise, Idaho.
Hey,
And if you're from Boise, it's Boise, not Boise, for whatever reason. That's how we say it. But I came down to Utah after graduating high school and attended BYU, Brigham Young University, which is just 50 miles south of where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And did my undergrad in neuroscience. So that brought me to Utah, and I never left.
you just you stayed. A similar thing with me. I'm a Florida boy, and came out here to go to BYU, and met a girl from Utah, and here I've been ever since.
Yeah, my wife's from North Carolina, and this is what happens at BYU a lot.
I guess so. Huh?
And yeah, we just happened to find a job in the industry after my undergrad, and at Czars Pharma, and we worked there for 9 years, and now Utah's home, and can't imagine living anywhere else at this point.
Yeah, it's a great place to live, that's for sure. So neuroscience as your undergrad, what got you interested in neuroscience?
Honestly, I was kind of looking for a generalist degree when I was
Not very generalist though, Mikey.
not anymore, no. But I wanted something with science. I wanted something that I was debating dental school, medical school, PhD, or working in the industry and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I think that neuroscience was the most interesting to me, just because it was an exciting new field, and you're talking about cutting edge science at the time, and is kind of the last biological field that really hasn't been fully elucidated, or at least we think. I would argue immunotherapy is there as well, but at the time, that's how I was thinking about it. And the nice thing about neuroscience was we got both deep kind of scientific, biological training, but also we talked about psychology, right, and the clinical practice of it, and marrying up, science with the practical application. And I think that was really a unique opportunity for me at the time, and it's just fascinating.
It actually, I love that when you have the overlap between the clinical application and the science, where you can actually see the science at work. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of things we don't understand to this day, and I hope I spent the better part of 15 years in central nervous system drug development, chronic pain and antipsychotics, and you name it. And there's just so much that we have to do still, I think.
There really is. A good friend of mine is the CEO of Denali, founder CEO of Denali Therapeutics, is trying to
Also named Ryan, I believe.
Also named Brian,
Yeah.
Lots. Also a University of Utah guy, and then Stanford, and that's his focus as well. It's that blood-brain barrier. It's figuring out the head.
We just recently had the first drug approved, I believe, for Alzheimer's officially, right? Like in the last week of this meeting, and that's been a graveyard for drugs being developed, and it just shows you that there's a lot to be learned about CNS and drug development moving forward.
No doubt. So after neuroscience, which sounds like a great major and a great training ground for you, you're up to the U and pursuing a PharmD. Was that like a logical next step for you? I mean, what got you interested on the pharmaceutical side? And most people will think maybe they don't really understand fully what a PharmD is, because you're not the guy in the white jacket behind the counter at the pharmacy.
That's right.
I mean, it's very different. I'm guessing you're getting deep into the pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic studies and patient centered outcomes and those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I went straight to work for 7 or 8 years at SARS before I actually went back to school and did the PharmD. And my background there was clinical operations, primarily in clinical trial management. It was a little more on the business side than the scientific side. And I just find, for me, I enjoy both, and that's why I love the industry, because it's really science and business application all put together, and specifically development, which is the translation of preclinical work into the clinic, and then kicking it over the fence to the business and commercial world. But I realized early on I wanted more training in that area, and it was just a matter of right timing for me. Pharmacy, or PharmD, is a doctor of pharmacy, and a lot of the guys behind the counter in the white jackets are PharmDs. In fact, that's the standard degree now. But you can go other directions. You can go PhD training. You can certainly enter the industry, and you can go all sorts of places from there. Medical communications is pretty common for a lot of PharmDs. Clinical development is my pathway, and I think because I had a background in clinical operations and had a propensity for the trial design portion and phase 1 clinical pharmacology trials in particular were of interest at the time. For me, that's where my training was conducted.
Walk us through, for those who'll be watching that don't maybe understand the phase 1, 2, 3. Sure. I think my layman's summary is phase 2 is safety, phase 2 is efficacy, and phase 3 is maybe a bit of both. But how do you describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, phase 1 is your first in-man trial, coming out of your non-clinical work and approval from, say, the FDA after approving an IND, which is an investigational new drug application. So you're essentially really just assessing safety. You're slowly escalating doses, and you may look for biomarkers if they exist, and get a read on what you may see in phase 2. But once you've established a dose that you think is reasonable, and you feel like the safety is acceptable, you move into phase 2. And phase 2, I call it proof of concept. There's variations of that, but essentially you are measuring efficacy and safety in the patient population now, typically.
Phase 1 is typically healthy volunteers, right?
Yeah, phase 1, that's a great point. Is almost always healthy volunteers. There's a subclass of phase 1 trials which tend to happen in the middle of phase 3, which are registration clinical pharmacology trials. So these are special populations like renal impairment, hepatic impairment, pediatrics, drug-drug interaction studies, et cetera. But phase 2, you go into patients, and now you're out of volunteers, and you really are trying to assess if your drug works. And there's varying levels of that proof of concept and validating that this drug has potential. And then, of course, phase 3 is official efficacy trials, usually associated with open label extensions that are pivotal for safety data in the population.
So your benchmark, what you're trying to do is show efficacy, but it needs to be a statistically significant improvement against standard of care, I would guess, right?
Yeah, standard of care or placebo for regulatory trials, at least against placebo, depending on your negotiation with the regulator.
So tell me a little bit about your experience with both SARS and also with PRA Health Sciences. I mean, how was that experience? What did you like? What did you not like? What did you learn? I remember a little bit about SARS. I remember you guys came up with some pretty cool, innovative products, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, SARS was primarily focused on transdermal applications, including 2 drugs that were ultimately approved by the FDA, which were topical anesthetics, and they were eutectic mixtures. So essentially, you blend 2 powders together, and it creates like a cream. And these creams have unique cosmetic properties. But one of them, we applied heat over the top of it using like an iron oxidation reduction reaction, and essentially it would help with vasodilation and help drug penetrate the skin. And it's still used today for port access in children, to numb the skin prior to port access or IV access in children. And the second product was an actual peel. So you would almost apply it over the face, peel it off. the face would be numb and then prepared for cosmetic procedures, and a number of other projects. And I think the real value for czars was that we were doing everything from regulatory affairs to medical writing to clinical operations to clinical development, and it was a real impressive group, and I think a training ground for myself in my career, wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, it sounds like you learned a lot. Do I remember it correctly, Mikey, that there was some sort of a like a lollipop that you guys developed as a drug delivery system?
Yeah, that's actually like a sister company prior to czars, but a couple of the same founders of Anesta Corp developed, yes, it was actually like a candied lollipop of fentanyl in a suppository mold, and so that's that was Anesta, and a couple of those founders started this company czars.
Got it. Okay.
On transdermal delivery, so unique delivery systems of drugs.
Yeah. These another project that I've been involved in. I obviously don't have an active management role, but I was a co-founder and equity holder, was on the board for a long time. But it's a nitric oxide based topical, and the product is called at this point is called Advanox. It's they're just about to start a phase 1, but it essentially nitric oxide is a it's a molecule that the body produces on its own, and vasodilation, and it does lots of stuff in the
I mean, minoxidil, which is like for hair regrowth, is essentially nitric oxide.
The less our body makes of it, right? And
so anything to increase blood flow to certain areas can be beneficial. For example, diabetic nephropathy in your foot. Neuropathy in your foot.
Absolutely.
Potential benefit from nitric oxide there.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And in fact, the indication that this company is going after is diabetic ulcers, specifically for that reason. And it's interesting because nitric oxide is such a unique gas that if it's exposed to air, it immediately dissipates. Yeah. And so what the invention is we take essentially two products, and they're in a foam, and you squirt part A, part B into a little dish, and you stir it up, and it creates a chemical reaction that produces pure nitric oxide, but they're trapped in the bubbles of the foam. And so as you apply the foam then topically, what happens is there's pressure from the top foam, and with the skin, the temperature of the skin, and the ingredients that are there in the skin, and that bottom level pops, and it immediately passes through into the skin, into the bloodstream, and then it just repeats layer, and after about 3 minutes, that little foam is just liquid, but you've got all the nitric oxide that's now into the bloodstream. It's kind of a cool product. Yeah,
pharmaceutics and drug delivery is a big rabbit hole you can go down, but it's really incredible science that exists.
And I think the company was a little frustrated. They were hoping because of the foam that they could go through like 510K as a device, but the FDA said, nope, this is a drug.
It's a drug device combo.
On the IND route. Yeah.
Drug device combo. If there's a drug involved, it's usually a drug.
Yeah. Well, so tell me, what were some of maybe the biggest lessons that you learned at either czars or at PRA?
I think right-sized approach is really critical. I mean, at PRA Health Sciences, I was on the global scientific affairs team, and primarily what we did there was consult with large pharma to tiny biotech and provide essentially a plan and a route to get their drug approved. So the initial phase 1 studies all the way through pivotal efficacy studies in the phase 3 program, and the unique elements associated with efficacy, like the endpoints, biomarkers, and obviously concerns from a safety perspective, and how to address that. And so it's essentially a roadmap for these companies. And when you're working with Merck, say, versus a little biotech like a cancer vax, for example, they have different needs and business requirements. And I think that's the first lesson that I learned, was not all companies are created equal with respect to their resources and what they can achieve. And so it's important to get to specific milestones that allow companies to be successful. There's probably 1 million drugs that are great drugs that never make it because of business reasons, which is unfortunate, but the reality of the world we live in.
It really is.
So that is understanding those needs and trying to develop programs to help those companies is how I cut my teeth in the industry.
Yeah, those are great lessons to learn. And what a valuable service. I know, having come through and co-founded now 2 biotechs and 2 med device companies, that regulatory assistance and consultancy is invaluable. Yeah, that's important.
I think the second lesson, Ryan, would be
Yeah.
probably something you've experienced as well. A lot of companies come out of academia.
Yep.
And academia has different values, I would say, than pharma, many of which are quite admirable, but don't always, optimize progressing a compound right in the real world. And so trying to find a balance between the interesting questions and the essential questions, and investing in your thesis. Why is this drug working, and how do we get it into people, and really it's translational, I suppose, is what we're focused on.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the second lesson. You can get going down lots of rabbit holes and interesting things, but you need to progress and move forward in a resource constrained environment.
Absolutely. Yes, I've lived that too, Mikey.
The real world for us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I'm super excited to hear more about your current role at KalVista. I know you're a clinical stage drug development company. Tell me a little bit about KalVista and what you're doing there and what gets you most excited about it.
Yeah, KalVista is an awesome company. It's founded out of the UK in Boston. Some scientists out of the Joslin Diabetes Center. At Harvard Medical School, and a research group that has existed for a while previous to KalVista, but they're really great at discovering serine proteases and specifically optimizing drugs for oral delivery. And that's unique maybe about KalVista. We're over 100 employees by a little bit.
All small molecules.
But we discover our own molecules and then develop them accordingly. So that's a really exciting element of KalVista that I hadn't dealt with in the past directly. We are now in phase 3 studying oral drug for treatment of hereditary angioedema. This is a disease where individuals are essentially missing or have a dysfunctional protein called C1 inhibitor.
Yep.
And triggers like stressful events in life or infection and other things can actually cause localized edema or swelling in their body, and that can happen really on any endothelial surface. So oropharyngeal, including the larynx, which can be life-threatening and has unfortunately taken the life of many patients in the past. In the abdomen, in the intestines, I've seen imaging where those intestines are completely swollen shut, and so essentially nothing can pass through. It's very painful. And then maybe more common would be peripheral or cutaneous swell. So your hand or your trunk or your legs or even genitals can swell. And it can be painful, but it's probably more disfiguring and concerning to those individuals where this occurs. And so these are episodic. They don't happen every day, but it is chronic. And it can be spontaneous. It's not always a trigger that's known. So we're developing a drug that essentially is an on-demand treatment for these episodic swells or attacks, as they're called, similar to how migraine drugs are used for treating migraine headaches.
The fact that it's chronic, does that mean, is it genetic? Is it hereditary? And then can you get to the root of it? Or is this you just have to treat it when an episode occurs?
Yeah, it is hereditary, so it's autosomal dominant. So
Yep.
If you have a parent with HAE, hereditary angioedema, you have a 50% chance of inheriting the disease. And the phenotype is more female than male, about 3 to 1 symptomatic female patients, because estrogen is actually a trigger for symptoms and attacks.
Okay.
With respect to the treatment, currently all the therapies for on-demand treatment are injectable, so either IV or subcutaneous, and so this is
The fact that it's an
compound in development that could be used or taken orally to
that's huge.
treat these attacks.
Yeah, I know in the drug development world, that's really the holy grail, is if you can make something that has oral bioavailability, that's a big deal.
Yeah, we hope so, and I think there's data that clearly show the earlier that you treat, just like a migraine, the earlier you treat, the more you can, you have better outcomes. You can minimize symptoms that will be coming, and hopefully get to a quicker resolution for patients.
Well, Mike, you've had an impressive career. Well done.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hopefully it's not close to being done. I still love the
You're far too
industry.
young for that.
Excited for what comes next as well.
Yeah. You've got a bright future ahead of you still. Two final questions. Thinking about the biotech space, I'm sort of an interesting one in the sense that I don't have a science background. Well, I joke because I graduated in political science. And so a lot of the scientists I work with, they're like, shut up, man, you're not a scientist. And like, yes, I am a political scientist.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't have a science background, but I've learned that every pharma company needs a business guy. And so I've just fallen in love with the biotech space. But what advice do you have for budding entrepreneurs or even people who are just interested in the biotech space?
Have a really strong investment thesis and rationale, and really pressure test that against the outside world, so to speak. It's critical to your future success, and also it de-risks your program. Biotech and biopharma inherently, at least small biopharma, are you're usually taking higher risks than big pharma is willing to take. And so having a really strong investment thesis, why is this drug going to work, and making sure that there's a translatability into actual patients, so you can either sell the company to another company which can commercialize this therapy and make it successful, or you can do that yourself. I think is really, really critical. I would say also it's okay to be really small and nimble for maybe longer than some companies are willing to do that. You have to have the right employees with various skill sets that can kind of wear a lot of hats. But moving fast and being nimble, but really focused on what you're trying to achieve is, I think, really critical.
That's great advice. Well, Mikey, thank you for being a part of our CancerVac CEO chat. It's always good to see you and good to catch up. And well done. You've done a lot of good stuff, and I'm excited for you now and for your future.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, it's great to chat, and wish you guys all the best. And we'll look forward to following you in the future.
All right. Thank you, Mikey. Have a great day.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan.
Bye-bye.
Bye.